Hey there, everybody. How's it going? Happy New Year. Nice to see you again. So, yeah, the question of the 40 megapixels has really kind of put the cat amongst the pigeons in APS-C land. A fellow by the name of Scott contacted me, and he's evidently doing some big test of the XH2, XH2S, X-T5, XS10, Sony A7 IV, A7R4. Okay, I mean, he contacted me and very generously offered to send me some, I guess, some of the photographs of, or the images that he's taking in these tests to take a look at them. And it's like, you know, I very much appreciate that, but really I don't have that much interest in it. And I started wondering, like, okay, well, why is that? And the reason is, and you know, and it's 40 years now, which I'm amazed at how old I've gotten so quickly. But it's 40 years now of doing this, and the other part of it is that it's very difficult to get excited about digital resolution when you shoot 4x5 film. So, and you know, I guess everything is relative, you know, and that's the key. So, when I shoot 4x5 film and I scan it on my lowly Epson 850 Pro at 3200, I think it works out to like 180 megapixels. And that's not even getting all the information out of the negative or the chrome, the 4x5 negative or chrome. So if you have it drum scanned, like, the resolution's much higher than that, which is insane. So, yeah, and so when it comes to digital, like, maybe, you know, the phase one, I don't know. I mean, digital for some reason just, I mean, so when I'm chasing ultimate image quality, like, I don't even think of digital. Like, that's not it. So, and that fact was brought home to me just the other day. I went out with my 4x5. I mean, the resolution is insane. And I could see it on the screen. I mean, you can go to like 500% and everything's sharp. So, so also it comes down to, again, you know, the 40 years of experience. And I've been chasing this my whole life. So at this point, you know, I don't need to really test anything to know where the 40 megapixel APS-C sensor is going to fall. Right. I mean, Scott said in his comment that, you know, so far it seems that it's somewhere between the 26 megapixel XS10 and the 60 megapixel Sony full frame. Well, of course. I mean, I probably, you know, it's nice of him to verify that, but if I had never shot the 40 megapixel sensor, that would have been my guess. So, so yeah, and really what it comes down to is does the equipment do the job that I need it to do? Does it accomplish the mission? And that's it for me. You know, when it came to Fuji, like, I've been shooting Fuji now for what, 2, 3, 4, 5 years now, off and on. Other systems have come and gone that I've tested to see, you know, will this work better for me? And every time I've gone to another system, the answer has been no. I've tried pretty much all the ones I'm interested in, and so I'm pretty much done with that. And concurrently with that, Fuji has finally solved all my problems. And that's really what it comes down to. That's how I approach this. Like, this is what I want to do. This is the gear I got. Okay, what problems do I have? All right, and so when I was shooting the XT3, XT4 combo, I was fairly happy. Okay, Like I was comfortable with all that, and I enjoyed shooting those cameras. What were my complaints? Well, my complaints were the IAF wasn't tracking in video, and the auto white balance and auto exposure when I would go out in the field wasn't really, you know, I had to set everything to manual on the X-T4 because it was surging. And on the X-T3 for stills, the 26 megapixel, the resolution was just left me wanting just that little nth degree more. Okay. And I'm not even so sure that that's a rational want. Okay, I think it was more just a psychological thing. But so what has Fuji done in this new generation of cameras in the X-T5, XH2, XH2S? Well, they've solved a lot of my problems. So they've solved all my problems, really. So they've given me the 40 megapixel sensor, which gives me that little bit more that I was looking for. And I don't know why everyone's complaining. I don't know what they're looking for. I mean, I don't know what they were expecting. But it is what it is, you know. I mean, the improvements now are going to be small. They're going to be incremental. They're not going to be like, you know, like they were going from 12 to 24 megapixels. Going from 12 to 24 megapixels is a much bigger jump than going 24 to 36. And having said all that, like, you know, when I compare any of the digital cameras that I've used, including the 60 megapixel Sony or the 45 megapixel A7 II Nikon, like, they're completely blown out of the water by my 4x5 film. So for me, pursuing ultimate resolution in digital is a fool's errand. Okay, because you know, if you've got to have the best, well, stop screwing around. Go get an 8x10, like Ben Horn. If ultimate resolution is your goal, dump all your digital gear, get an 8x10 camera like Ben Horn has, and go be happy. Okay. So when it comes, so what I'm trying to say is, like, you know, there's always something sharper, right? And so you have to look at it, you know, so there's the pursuit of ultimate resolution, and then there's the pursuit of resolution that's good enough for the job that you're asking the camera to do for you. And that's where I'm at, okay? And for me, having used full frame, having used APS-C, the allure of APS-C to me is the size, weight, cost. And people try to justify their full frames and say, ooh, and if you pick and choose, sure. If you compare the Fuji 16 to 55 2.8 and the 40 to 1, what is it? The 50 to 140 2.8 to the f4 lenses in full frame, the Fuji lenses are heavier. I get that. But if you want a clear example of the difference between full frame and APS-C, just compare the 100 to 400 and the Fuji 75 to 300. I mean, you're talking the Sony 100 to 400 is $2,500. It weighs like 3.5 pounds. It's like this big, you know. And the Fuji 70 to 300 is, you know, this big. It's $800 and it weighs like a pound. So yeah, so there's definitely a size and weight and cost advantage. And I enjoy the way the cameras function. I enjoy the way they're laid out. I enjoy the menus. I enjoy the particularly the XT series, right? I really enjoy using these cameras for stills. And the XH2 and XH2S are great for video. So yeah, Fuji solved the problems for me that I had with the X-T3, X-T4. And so now, like, I'm a happy camper, okay? And The only time that I actually want to do any testing, because I'm kind of over it. I mean, that used to be my thing. I get that, but I'm kind of over that. And I've always tested stuff from the standpoint of, and when I test stuff to say like, okay, when I get out in the field, what's this going to be like? Is this going to work for me? And really, the real test is, 6 months or a year's worth of shooting and trying to get the job accomplished that I'm trying to get accomplished, and then reevaluating and saying, okay, is this working for me or is this not working for me? Is this making my life easier or is this making my life more difficult? Am I getting the results that I want? Okay. And the bottom line is even with the X-T3, I was getting the results that I wanted. All right. With the one caveat that in the back of my head, I was always saying, boy, I wish I had a little bit more resolution. There was that little voice back there, which, like I said, might just be a deficiency, a mental deficiency on my part, or it might have been real. I don't know. But now with the 40 megapixels, there's no question. It's like I've got everything that I want. So, yeah. And so, so for testing, like and the reason I got into this I went down this rabbit hole is because like Ian Worth was getting results that I wasn't getting. Okay. So my 40 megapixel images are always sharper at 100% than or equal to, which is not true because again, if the image is larger, then the 40 megapixels is sharper, right? If they're equal, if I compare a 40 megapixel image to a 26 megapixel image at 100% and they're equal resolution, but the objects in the 40 megapixel image are larger because of the more pixels, then the 40 megapixels is sharper because it takes less to enlarge it. It'll enlarge bigger than the 26 megapixels will. Okay, that's another thing. I tend to print my work. So my final product is print, not screen. And that might affect, my judgments on what I like and what I don't, and what works and what doesn't, and what's sharp and what isn't. So when Ian was going to 100% and his images weren't as sharp as the 26 megapixel images that he had, well, that is completely contrary to all the results that I've seen. So that had to be looked into, and I had to double check to make sure that what I'm seeing is real. Okay, to verify, even though I knew it was, but I wanted to absolutely make sure before I started spouting off that what I'm saying is correct. And so again, there's something in Ian's pipeline that isn't working properly, is my guesstimation on that. All right. A lot of people are now crapping all over the 10 to 24 f4 lens. I haven't used it on the 40 megapixel sensor yet. So I have the new version, which is supposed to be optically the same as the old version, but now that's piqued my curiosity, and that's something I want to test. Okay, so I'm going to be doing that soon, is checking out my copy of the 10 to 24 on the 40 megapixel camera and seeing like how bad is it, or is it bad? And I seem to have a sharp copy on the 26 megapixel sensor. I'm curious, how bad it is on the 40 megapixel sensor. Really why I'm curious for this is because is it usable or isn't it? For me, for what I want to do, right? So no point carrying it around. If I take it out into the field once in a lifetime shot, get out there, click, and all of this, the thing's soft on 40 megapixel. That's not going to work for me. Having said that, when I got the X-T5, I believe I bought it in the kit form. One of these, it was the XH2 or the X-T5. I got the kit form with the new 16 to 80 f4. And although I don't think the 16 to 80 f4 is on the list of approved 40 megapixel sensor lenses, it's sharp, and I'm happy with it. So really, my 10 to 24 is really only covering 10 to 16, because my new normal zoom lens for what I'm doing is the 16 to 80 f4, kind of replacing my 18 to 55. The 18 to 55, I have a copy that's marginal. And it's probably my weakest Fuji lens, which is interesting because some people have copies of that think it's just spectacular. And my 18 to 55 ain't that great. It's okay. It's not great. So it's good. It's not great. This lens so far seems great. So this is going to replace my 18 to 55 as my kind of do everything lens, the 16 to 80. So, okay, so yeah, I replaced the 16 to 80 with the 18 to 55 with the 16 to 80, and I replaced the 55 to 200 with the 70 to 300. But it's kind of interchangeable, mix and match, depending upon what I'm doing. Really enjoying that 70 to 300, though. That's a spectacular lens, and I'm glad I got that. All right, so just some thoughts on testing and why I'm testing and why I'm not testing. I mean, you know, one last thing I'll say is, you know, I went through this back in the day with film, right? I started out shooting 35 millimeter, as everyone did back in the day. And then I got a darkroom and I started printing, and I started wanting to print larger than 8x10. And my 11x14s with 35 millimeter film weren't as sharp as I wanted them to be. So I started getting into medium format. And as soon as I made the jump to medium format, 645, like I had to sharpen up my technique because all of a sudden my images got fuzzy again, right? So with 35 millimeter when I first started, my images were fuzzy. I learned what I was doing. I learned how to get sharp images. I could make sharp 8x10s. I wasn't satisfied with my 11x14s, so I went up to 645. My 11x14s started looking better, but I had to relearn my technique and sharpen up my skills and get everything dialed in more precisely to get sharp images with 645. Also, because of the focal lengths and the f-stops, I was limited. I couldn't photograph as many things as I could photograph in 35 millimeter with medium format. And but my 11x, when I did get the whole thing in place and everything was working properly, my 11x14s looked great, and even my 16x20s looked great. But then I went to 6x7, and going from 645 to 6x7, the focal lengths got longer. My skills again had to sharpen up. To get sharp images, and I had to learn the techniques, particularly with the Pentax 6.7, the quirks of that particular camera. But then my 16x20s looked great. I could even make larger prints, 20x30s, from 6.7 negatives, etc. And then I went 4x5, and the focal lengths doubled again, and there was a limitation to what I could shoot. And that's really where it's at now. You know, if you look at Ben Horn's photography, what you're seeing, if all of his images kind of look like they're in this box, they're all kind of the same, and I'm not putting them down, I'm just saying, and I don't mean to pick Ben Horn specifically. Look at any large format film photographer that you can see a lot of their work. It's all going to be certain subjects. It's all going to be the same kind of genre of subjects, because that's what you can photograph technically with those large format cameras because of the focal lengths and the limitations of the focal lengths, both in terms of in 35 millimeter terms with a large format camera, you have focal lengths from I would say about 24 millimeters to about 150 millimeters, and that's stretching it, okay? On my 4x5, I go 28, roughly, 28, 45, 65, 100. And that's with 4 lenses. And that's it. So, yeah. So there's limitation to what I can photograph. Also, if the wind's blowing, etc., So there's no super telephotos. There's no super wide angles. I mean, with exceptions, rare exceptions. But it gets much more difficult to implement that. So really, when you jump up in format, it limits your subject availability. Well, to a much lesser extent, the same thing happens when you go from APS-C to full frame to medium format with digital. It's the same thing. Also, when you go APS-C, full frame, medium format, digital, every time you bump up, you also have to improve your skills and your quality. And same thing when you go from 26 megapixels to 40 megapixels. I mean, with Ian Worth and his problems getting sharp 100% views on his 40 megapixel images, it could be something as ridiculous as, even though he uses a heavy tripod, it could be something where that particular camera with that particular tripod, the resonance frequencies are similar, and it's causing a slight camera shake, and it doesn't take much. I mean, it's to the point where with a 40 megapixel sensor, now you really need to use the front curtain electronic shutter, because the front curtain opening on your shutter can cause enough blur to mitigate your increase in resolution. Okay, so a bit of a technical video this is, but I just, these are things, some people, if you're into it, you're into it, and if you've watched this far, you've got to be into it, or you just like listening to me talk. But anyway, I just want to explain a few things. These are the things I've been thinking about, and I think you're not going to get this information anywhere else. So that might be a good thing or a bad thing. Anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. Got some exciting stuff coming up in 2023 and looking forward to it. And we'll see you out there. Have a good one. Bye.